Hey everybody. In this video, I'm going to just give you a sample in terms of what it takes to evaluate if your project has been delivered based on the successful metrics, whether you're retrospecting or in terms of having to close out whatever stage you are to evaluate, right? Let's assume you're just crafting an initial report that you would want to evaluate from your end point of view in order to present to the stakeholders, right? So now, I'll in a minute or few minutes, I'll quickly show a small report document that we can go step by step to evaluate, which will help you to evaluate any gaps that has been seen, right? So why do you need to do all of it is obviously before closing out of your project, your team needs to know if with the all of you have met the goals along with your key stakeholders and if those goals that were planned before starting a project during the planning and build-up phase, will they actually apply right now? And how do you compare your progress with the scope that everyone agreed upon in the starting stage at the beginning versus the closeout phase, right? So let's understand how to discuss your findings with the stakeholders and reach to the point of having the consensus with them in terms of how you finished the project versus how it could have been finished, right? So let me share my screen a minute. So if you see, I want to quickly, walk you through in terms of, let's say, there was a project, right, that we considered to do, and we have stakeholders who are all present in the session listed out. So I'm just giving you a quick draft in terms of what you can do, right? In the use case, especially we evaluated during the project planning and the implementation phase point of view. So the having to move certain servers to the new infrastructure like web server, database server, and having to run this application with the new infrastructure, what it takes to reach to the point, right? Now, at the end of the project closure phase, let's say now what was the phase initial step that that you're taken. Let's assume it was equipment acquisition in this scenario. What really worked for you well, right? Acquiring that infra on time, on planned budget. That is a quick win, right? Then what didn't work? Again, I'm just giving you a sample craft of the report that what could possibly be the case. And I think it's important for you to at least leverage the structure and craft the report or the retrospect point of view, right? So logistical problems with availability of data, maybe you acquired, whether it was in delay, not delivered in a timely manner, or maybe there's a defect, the configuration is not working, whatever, and did it incur any additional expense, right? So ways to improve, obviously, if the problem, based on the problem, you need to understand what could be the better approach that you could have taken, right? So in this case, I'm just saying maybe I'm presuming that equipment did, arrive earlier, and maybe we could have planned better in terms of ordering it ahead of a time based on the project planning phase timeline. So next task, presume we have all the equipment acquisition done, and then in the phase of provisioning and implementing the configuration that's relevant for the equipment, right? So what worked, obviously, what I'm listing out here is right before or during the provision phase, what was the effort that was taken in terms of recovering, right? If there was any critical glitch that could have occurred. And here I'm highlighting the import that we have saved the timeline. But in a scenario where something is really goes wrong, is it a matter of saving the days, or is it a matter of having to consider having more days in additional time frame, but still the outcome was good, right? But here what I'm trying to highlight the fact is we save the time frame still best with the effort of two key stakeholders that have invested in terms of configuring that equipment, right? The next phase, test equipment. What worked in the scenario, right? Having to plan with a proper framework approach. The testing phase was successful. At the same time, I was able to test the integrity of any database content that was discovered, right? The bugs, what it takes to fix the issues, right? To cut over the timeline point of view and go live with the equipment again, what worked, what didn't work, ways to improve, right? Test again. So if you look at the approach I'm taking here, I've listed different phases and I've just listed what worked, what didn't work, ways to improve, right? So you could do the similar thing, listing out all the phases and list out similar factors of what worked, what didn't work, and ways to improve, right? So finally, once you have done that for all phases of or headlines of your initiative, there are a couple more things that you need to understand. How well did the actual project or team do, right? I've listed just very few questions, and I think you can leverage these as a sample and add on to it more, build upon it. Right? In achieving goals and meeting project objectives, what was the success criteria, or what do you feel the success state that you could evaluate or consider? All goals are achieved. I'm being very optimistic and saying all goals were achieved. That was my success, right? Success result. All at meeting deadlines and the final completion date. I'm just saying we have met our target date, but that is an ideal scenario to expect. I'm pretty sure you have some risks that you had to deal with and what kind of mitigation plan that you have taken. And monitoring and staying within budget. I'm just saying slight overrun was unavoidable. Did have what kind of alternative actions that were taken has to be listed out. At communicating with stakeholders, partial success, we could have done better at communicating because not all stakeholders had every stage of clarity in terms of a switch in plans that were taken or scope creep or the velocity of the budget of the resources that we had thought could be sufficient initially is not sufficient anymore. Those readjustments had to be done, but it was not communicated, right? Or you have to make sure this over communication is okay, but you need to do your best. And whether allocated resources appropriate, sufficient, and efficiently used. Again, if you remember the equation that we thought about is quality is equal to time plus cost. How did those parameters come into picture, right? Cost, time are mandatory. At the same time, the cost can include the people and various other infrastructure costs also. What are the key lessons learned that can be applied to the future projects? So if you see that clearly, this can give you an initial glimpse about whether your project was really successful or what were your gaps, right? So having said that, I think I really want you to take multiple attempts of having these details in place before you can think about presenting to immediate stakeholders, right? When in terms of lessons learned, let's say what are the key lessons learned that can be applied to your future projects? It is really critical to anticipate that next steps are considered and to alert groups or individuals of either be the infrastructure point of view, requirement point of view, or the process amendment point of view as early as possible, right? By doing all of this, maybe you could have, let's say in the infrastructure point, you could have acquired the equipment in more timely manner, right? Instead of scrambling it up at the end of the target date or last later phases to meet your target, right? So the steps you take to wrap things up will depend on whether your team assumes the ownership of its own deliverables or hands them off to organizations, others in the organization. You have to make sure there's a due diligence taken right from the project manager point of view, engineering manager, until the point of technical leader and individual contributors involved in assessing the state of the project. So once this is done, you make sure you debrief with the team. No matter what's the outcome, make sure you have scheduled the time that's needed for post-evaluation to debrief the document that you've crafted, right? To document the process, any new amendments of what has been followed and the lessons that are learned, the lessons that can be shared, any new inputs that you can take through, right? Because the post evaluation is really an opportunity for discovery and not for criticism or a blame, right? So team members, if they're really feeling the perspective of having, they could be punished for the past problems, and if hiding is a solution, that is not the case. Make sure you set the culture that there are better ways to do things, and that happens by evaluating what is done already, right? So you develop your effective post-evaluation report. Right. I hope that really helps, depending on the size of the company that you're working for and depending on the role that you're playing for. The structure planning of your post-evaluation report is very critical in any project planning phase. Again, please go back and watch through the sequence of videos that I've created for project planning, and feel free to share your thoughts if you feel there is more new videos required. Thank you.